An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643, the most influential work in the science of Hadith ever. Number 8. Discovery. Wijada. Wijada, the verbal noun of wajada, yajidu, is a neologism, unknown to the early Arabs. We heard from Mustafa ibn Zakaria al-Nahrawani, the great expert in a number of sciences, that later writers coined the word wijada for reference to the knowledge taken from a written source, sahifa, without audition or transference. This was done on the basis of the distinction the early Arabs made between the various verbal nouns of wajada to discriminate between the different meanings of the verb. That is, when the early Arabs said he came across his camel which had strayed, the verbal noun is wijdan. When they said he found the thing he was seeking, the verbal noun is wujud, for anger. The verbal noun mawjida, for wealth, wujd for the verbal noun is mawjida for wealth, wujd, and for love, wajd. So the Arabic words aren't given, so it's transliteration. It's not as easy to read. An example of a discovery is when a student comes across someone else's book in that individual's own handwriting containing some hadith which he relates, and the student has never met him, or he did meet him but did not hear from him the hadith which he had found recorded in his handwriting, and he doesn't have a license for him or anything similar. He should say, I found wajadtu in the handwriting of X, or I read in the handwriting of X, or in the book of X in his handwriting is Y ibn Z informed us. Then he should mention his teacher and give the rest of the isnad and the text. Or he should say, I found or I read in the handwriting of X from Y, and mention the person who transmitted to him and those above him. This has been continuously practiced in early and modern times. It falls under the headings of interrupted, munqati' or loose, mursal. However, it is tinctured with cohesion on the account of the statement, I found in the handwriting of X. Sometimes someone commits misrepresentation, dallasa, tadlis, by saying regarding the individual whose handwriting he found, from X or X said. That is disgraceful misrepresentation when it is such that it falsely promotes the impression that he heard the material from the teacher, as was discussed above in the category on misrepresentation. Some people speak carelessly and unqualifiedly, and they apply he transmitted to us or he informed us to instances of discovery. Whoever does that opens himself up for criticism. When the student finds a hadith in someone's composition, and the composition is not in the handwriting of that individual, he should say, X mentioned, or X said, Y informed us, or X mentioned from Y. This is interrupted and does not contain any trace of cohesion. All of the above applies when the student is confident that it is in the handwriting of the individual mentioned or his book. If this is not the case, then let him say, it reached me X, balagani an fulan, I found from X, wajadtu an fulan, or similar expressions, or let him plainly indicate the means of transmission he relied upon in that regard, by using the expressions of some earlier scholars. For example, I read in the book of X in his handwriting, and Y informed me that it was the handwriting of X, or I found in a book which I thought was in the handwriting of X, or in a book the writer of which says that he is X ibn Y is, or in a book which he said it to be in the handwriting of X is. When the student wishes to transmit hadith from a book ascribed to an author, let him not say X said such and such, until he becomes confident of the authenticity of the copy by his own collation of it, or some other trustworthy persons, with numerous other texts. We indicated this earlier at the end of category 1. When that, or something like it, does not happen, let the student say, it reached me from X that he said such and such. I found in a copy of book X, or other similar expressions. In these times, most people have become lax, applying without qualification unequivocal terminology to this kind of material, without research or verification. One of them reads a book ascribed to a certain author, and transmits from it hadith from the author without becoming certain of the authenticity of the copy, saying, X said such and such, or X mentioned such and such. The correct course is the one presented above. If the reader is knowledgeable and astute to the extent that for the most part omissions, slips and transpositions are not hidden from him, we hope that he will be permitted to apply without qualification an unequivocal expression like X said or X mentioned to the material he relates from that transmitter. So far as I can tell, many authors have been pleased to do that for the material they transmitted from the books of other people. Knowledge is with God. All of this discussion concerns the particulars of transmitting by means of discovery in regard to the permissibility of putting into practice the discovered material one has confidence in. We heard from one Maliki that most of the Maliki transmitters of Hadith, jurists and others do not regard this as valid. It is said that Shafi'i and certain of his other thoughtful disciples endorsed the validity of acting on material transmitted this way. One of the thorough Shafi'i scholars in theoretical law and unequivocally ruled in favour of the necessity of acting upon the material once confidence in the inscription is attained. He said, if what we said were presented to the majority of the scholars of Hadith, they would reject it. The opinion he unequivocally gave in favour of it is the only one possible in latter ages. If putting a doctrine into practice did depend on its proper transmission, it would become impossible to act on transmitted material because of the infeasibility of meeting the standard of transmission in our time. This was discussed earlier in Category 1. God knows best. Al-Farisi said, the expert Abu Bakr al-Bayhaqi informed us. He said, Abu Hussein ibn Bishran informed us. He said, Abu Amr ibn Sammak informed us. He said, Hanbal ibn Ishaq transmitted to us. He said, Sulaiman bin Ahmed transmitted to us. He said, Al-Walid, that is Ibn Muslim, transmitted to us. He said, Awza'i used to say, this knowledge is a noble one which men received among us. When it went into books, those unworthy of it came upon them, among them. The disagreement over writing hadith has disappeared, and Muslims have come to agree unanimously on allowing and permitting it. If the hadith had not been recorded in books, they would have become obliterated in later ages. God knows best. Those who write and collect hadith are under an obligation to focus their efforts on recording clearly the transmitted material they write down, or obtain in handwriting of someone else exactly as the transmitters related it, using the vowel signs and diacritical points necessary to eliminate ambiguity. Often someone confident of his intelligence and attentiveness is disdainful of this, and has had unfortunate consequences. People are susceptible to forgetfulness, and the first to forget was the first person. Providing the diacritical marks in a text prevents it from becoming unintelligible, and marking the vowel signs prevents ambiguity. No one should concern himself with indicating those obvious things that are almost never doubtful. Indeed, whoever said, vocalize only what is obscure, spoke well. I read in the handwriting of Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Baghdadi in his book Simat al-Khat wa Rukumuha, the characteristics and forms of script that scholars dislike, marking the diacritical points and inflectional vowels unless the word is ambiguous. On the other hand, someone else recounted from some people that unambiguous words should be vocalized as well as the ambiguous. That is because the beginner and the non-expert in the discipline cannot distinguish an ambiguous word from an unambiguous one, or correct inflectional vowels from incorrect. God knows best. The following is a discussion of some useful points related to the above. 1. One should take care to clarify with diacritical marks and vowel signs and so forth doubtful proper names rather than other doubtful words, because proper names cannot be figured out by the sense of the passage, and their correct reading cannot be inferred from the context. 2. For ambiguous words, it is recommended that one clarify them first in the body of the text and then write them in unconnected letters in the margin opposite that place in the text. This is the fullest way to make them clear and the way furthest from ambiguity. The diacritical points and vowel signs of other words sometimes intrude from above and below on the words, which one clarifies within the lines of the texts, especially when the handwriting is small and the lines are narrow. This is the advice of a number of careful scholars. God knows best. 3. Tiny handwriting is concerned when there is no reason requiring it. Is condemned when there is no reason requiring it. We heard Hanbal ibn Ishaq say, Ahmed ibn Hanbal saw me writing in a small hand and said, do not do that. The thing you need most will betray you. We read that one teacher saw an instance of small handwriting. He said, this is the handwriting of someone who is not convinced that God. He exalted will provide a replacement for the sheet of paper he is using. A valid excuse for writing in a small hand is, for instance, that the writer does not find enough room on the paper, or that he is a traveller who needs to make his handwriting small so that the burden of his book will be lighter for him, or something like that. God knows best. 4. Precision. Without either excessive looseness or excessive compression is preferred in the student's handwriting. We read from Ibn Qutaybah that Umar ibn al-Khattab, God be pleased with him, said, "The worst handwriting is scrawling, and the worst recitation is spluttering. The best handwriting is the clearest. God knows best." 5. Just as the letters with diacritical points are made clear by pointing, so should the letters without diacritical points be fixed with a sign to indicate the absence of pointing. The way that people clarify these letters varies. Some invert the points, putting the points which belong above the letters under the analogous unappointed letters. So the place points under ta, ra, sad, ain, and the other unpointed letters like them. One of the practitioners of this said that the points under the point seen should be spread out like a roll, while those that are over the pointed sheen should be arranged like a tripod. Some other people make the sign indicating the absence of pointing over the unpointed letters in the shape of a nail paring resting on its back. Some put under the unpointed ha a small connected ha, and do the same under the dal, ta, sad, sin, ain, and the rest of the ambiguous unpointed letters. These are the widespread and well-known forms of sign indicating that a letter is unpointed. There are also signs found in numerous old books which many people do not understand, like the sign of those who make a small line over an unpointed letter, and those who put something like a shape like a hamza under an unpointed letter. God knows best. 6. No one should employ a personal system of signs in his book, which no one else can understand, and which throws others into confusion. Some who collect in their books several different transmissions of a text and signal the relation of each transmitter with 1 or 2 letters from his name and the like do this. If the writer explains in the beginning or the end of the book what he means by these signs and symbols, there is no problem. Nevertheless, it is better that the writer avoid using symbols. He should write for each transmission the name of its transmitter completely in a shortened form, and not merely write a sign for some of it. God knows best. 7. The student should place a circle between 2 hadith to separate and distinguish them. We read that Abu Zinad, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Ibrahim ibn Ishaq al-Harbi, Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari were among the authorities who did that. The expert Khatib al-Baghdadi recommended that the circles be hollow. Then he collated the text. When he collected the text, he put a dot in the circle that followed each hadith he had finished collating, or he drew a line through its center. He said some scholars did not used to count something as part of what they heard unless it was marked that way, or words to that effect, and God knows best. Number 8. It is reprehensible for someone to write a name like Abdullah, the son of X, the son of Y, and Abd at the end of the line, and the rest at the beginning of the next line. In the same way, it is reprehensible with Abdurrahman, the son of X, and the rest of the names containing Abd with the name of God, and the Abd be written at the end of a line with the name of God, and the rest of the lineage at the beginning of the next line. Similarly, it is undesirable for the messenger said, Qala Rasul, to be written at the end of a line with of God, may God be exalted, bless him and save him and his family, alayhi sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and the like being written on the beginning of the next line. God knows best. Stay tuned for many more parts.